Grand Rising, everybody. How you doing? This is your Coach Renz. Of course, for those who are just now finding me, we are a channel where we deconstruct religion. Right now, we are in our first 5 minutes getting people an opportunity to come on today. We're going to be doing some comparisons between the Jesus character and many other previous characters that were before we are streaming for the first time on, what is this, Twitch. So we're going to see how this works as well. There was something on Twitch that I wanted to do and I can't find it. I remember doing it yesterday. Let's see if we can figure it out. I want to make sure that everything's squared away. I don't know where it's at, so oh well. So if you are finding me for the first time, let me know. We are going to when you come on, let me know who you are, where you are. Here we go. I want to make sure. I gotta tell you, I was irritated. I can't see if you guys are typing anything right now because I'm checking out some stuff, making sure some things are the way I want them to be on this Twitch one. All right, we're good on that. The Grand Rising. I am a bit irritated. I got booted. Off of TikTok. They banned my channel on TikTok, and I'm not going back. I have my other channels on TikTok for cigars, and I do have my Art of Tantric Love channel on there. I will still maintain those as I build those channels on these other platforms as well. But I got booted, and I'm going to be that guy. If I can't speak freely, if I can't talk about what, to a certain extent, if I can't speak freely, I don't want to be. I'm not going to participate in your program. I'm not going to sit up there and placate to whoever is in control of it, because that's just bullshit to me. So they can kick rocks for all I care. They can kick rocks. So Grand Rising Derek, Michelle, how you doing? James, Michael, all right. What's up, bro? Michael got on here before 11, 12 o'clock, y'all. It's a new day. It's a dawn of a new day. I gotta get my cigar ready. And Grand Rising Debbie, I expect today to be a very good conversation. Very good conversation. We're gonna be comparing Jesus, the Jewish story and elements of Jesus' story, really biblical story, but more focused on New Testament. But also a little bit of Paul and some other people. I had an image that I wanted to keep in front of me, but I lost it. And I got it again. How many of you guys have ever really done this before? Let's look at some of the things of Jesus compared to Horus, to Krishna, Mithra, Dionysus, Atticus. I know many people saw I forgot the name of that documentary that had came out some years ago. That shit caused some uproar. Being Love, Grand Rising, Warner. Is it Owner? I think I'm saying it right. Owner. I like to say people's names right. It's respectful. Being respectful. No. So today, I was going to do What time is it? Oh, exactly 5 minutes. All right. So, welcome to the show. Welcome to the show. I hope that somebody come in on Stitch because I have no idea what they would look like if they come on Stitch. Uh, I guess it'll have a Stitch symbol by their name, kind of like all you guys have um, Facebook or YouTube on by yours. There is at least one viewer right now on Stitch. If they don't mind making a comment, I would greatly appreciate it just for my own curiosities. I would greatly appreciate that. So how's everybody doing? Okay, so owner, right? All the same storylines. Those are some of the things we're going to look at. So what led me into this conversation today? So I was reminded of the Bacchae a few weeks ago, having a conversation, and within the conversation, I was talking to somebody, and I was like, well, the story of Paul has some similarities to what happened with Pantheus in the Bacchae, and they had never heard of it. So they went away, they read it, they read the Bacchae. Of course, there's a whole bunch of stuff with it. It was written by Euripides. And there's an aspect of the Bacchae that when he came back, he was like, I see what you're talking about. So to have a deeper understanding of it, and you guys, I implore you to go read the Bacchae for yourself. So Dionysus is the god within this story. And so Dionysus is originally born. He's not born as Dionysus. His death and resurrection actually happens very early in his life. He's born son of Zeus, but he's immediately killed as an infant by the Titans. And if you know your Greek mythology, which I didn't plug up this microphone. If you know your Greek mythology, then you'll know that Zeus and his brothers defeated the Titans to take over, to then take over. But if you also know Zeus don't like humans, which that story sounds familiar, right? So Dionysus is born. I can't remember, and he was born of a virgin birth, sort of. He's born. He then is immediately soon after killed by the Titans. And then he's born again out of Zeus's thigh, right? So he's born out of Zeus's thigh, and now he's Dionysus. He's the god of wine and merriment, changes water into wine. He has a Eucharist where he says to drink his blood and like wine, and to eat his body, his bread. So he shares the same Eucharist as Jesus, or rather, Jesus shares the same Eucharist as Dionysus. Now, in doing so, those are some of the similarities. Those are some of the similarities between him and Jesus, and he's the resurrected, the Son of God. He's the Alpha and the Omega. He declares himself to be the King of Kings in some of his writings. And of course, when he was born. He was born on December 25th. Like all of them, he's born on December 25th. So you have these similarities. But one of the things that sticks out that many people don't pay attention to is that he also has some similarities that are written within the Bible that most people would notice. For instance, Pantheus. So Dionysus disguises himself. Let me give you the whole thing. There's a couple of similarities in this one epic of the story. So you have a portion of the story where Dionysus, he goes out and he always have a bunch of women. There are always women are his primary followers. Women are always there. Sounds familiar, right? And he takes these women. They have a tendency to go out into the woods, out into a sacred place, and they would drink wine. And they would get somewhat drunk, but the drunkenness was more of a spiritual drunkenness. And when they would be drunk, when Pantheus sent one of his people to watch over them, to spy on them, and he said they were in a drunkenness, but not they was in a spiritual drunkenness, that they were in the spirit, and there were flaming tongues above their heads, speaking, yet not burning their hair. So kind of a day of Pentecost, going out to the Garden of Gethsemane deal, being filled with the Spirit, all those things rolled up into that event. And afterwards, Pentheus comes and he wants to persecute Dionysius and persecute all his followers. Sounds like Paul, right? So he takes he takes Dionysius into custody, puts him, and Dionysius goes willingly. Sounds like Jesus going willingly. Goes willingly, goes to jail. But much like the Joseph story, and not the Joseph, much like the Paul story, he's in jail, and then an earthquake happens, and he's allowed to be freed from jail. But this whole time, Pentheus has disguised him. Dionysius has disguised himself. He doesn't look like Dionysius. So then, when he walks into the court of Pentheus, Pentheus like, how'd you get out? Was just strolling on up in here? And then he reveals himself to him. And then instantly in that moment, at the revelation of the revealing, after he had been blinded by Dionysius so that he didn't recognize him as Dionysius, Pentheus is then converted. Didn't fall off a horse, but he's converted immediately from being blinded from seeing the trueness of Dionysius. After that, Dionysius makes a claim that is very similar to what you hear Jesus says about Paul. Jesus says about Paul that he doesn't know how much he will suffer for worshiping me, for recognizing me, for switching over to me. And Dionysius says the same thing with Pentheus, that he is unaware of the amount of suffering that he's about to incur. And in both stories, they both suffer. So when in this one, and as I was going over the Bacchae, I was reminded of how Paul, the story of Paul, is more than likely just a story. It reminded me of why I originally thought that, because I remember reading the Bacchae a long time ago and coming to the realization that even Paul, and many people like to say, well, we can validate the letters of Paul. You can validate that some letters were written, but you can't validate that it was an actual Paul that wrote those letters. Right? That this Paul of the Sanhedrin wrote them. You can only validate that it's been ascribed to this Paul, that these older church leaders, that they have said, hey, this is Paul. Paul wrote these. Paul came and preached in Rome. And I always say, okay, if there was so much persecution going on in Rome, how was Paul just walking around preaching? Freely just preaching. And sure, he went to jail a couple of times. But for the most part, he's just walking around preaching, doing his own thing. So it's conflicting situations when you look at Paul's ability to just go to and fro, build and set up churches and do all these things. But supposedly the Roman government was persecuting the hell out of these people. So why would you go and set up churches on Front Street, making yourself readily apparent to the authorities? It does not, all of it doesn't, you can't have it both ways. Right? Now, yes, I'm smoking a Gurkha again. Some of these other, I believe it was Justin Martyr who initiated the theory of saying that, look, because the devil knew that Jesus was going to come and he knew Revelations and how the story was going to end, he came ahead of time and created all these myths concerning other deities that would be similar to the story of Jesus in order to fool people so they wouldn't know when the real one came. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it was Justin Martyr who created the devil did it first myth, or with that theory, I should say. The theory of the devil came and did it first. And many Christians make that their argument, that the devil came knowing what the story was going to be and decided that he was going to fool you. And it worked, because look at y'all now. Look at us now. We're sitting here and we're saying, hey, there are doppelgangers who came before Jesus. Jesus is the doppelganger. He's not the original. The temple text, the pyramid text, has existed for hundreds of years, centuries, if not thousands of years, before it was the temple, before it was inscribed on the pyramids. The Nubio-Kemetic society existed for 3,000 years before Jesus. 3,000. And in those 3,000 years, although the story has different fluctuations depending upon the era that you're looking at, but for the most part, the Osirian story is pretty much the same. Osiris, or Asar, whichever name fits comfortably with your mind, he was tricked by his brother. And his brother was pissed at him because, hey, I wanted to marry Isis. Seth was like, I want to marry Isis. And Osiris was like, nah, bro, she mine. And then he was pissed. He was jealous. And that was like their big rivalry, was because of the marriage of Osiris and Isis. So he marries her. Set is upset. Set develops. He said, you know what? I'm gonna have this party. And he snuck his brother's measurement. Made this casket. Said, oh man, anybody would love to be buried in this thing. Whoever can fit in that thing right there perfectly is yours. My gift to you. Of course, many people tried, and then it just so happened Osiris fit perfectly. Osiris gets in the casket. And then his henchmen nail him down in the casket. Now the story is a little weird. You're supposed to be Osiris, you're supposed to be a god. They can just nail you in the coffin. But be that as it may, that's the story. He gets nailed in the coffin. The coffin is set out on the water. He dies. Osiris's two wives, Isis and I forgot the other wife's name, they go out and they search for him. They find his body. But in fear of the magic that Isis knows, Seth recaptures the body, cuts the body up, flings it all over the place. Isis goes, she finds all the body parts again, except for his ping. Then she forms an obelisk in place of his ping, hovers over it. So she has this immaculate conception. Well, he's revived, he's resurrected. And then as he's resurrected, she hovers over, and they get, in some versions of the story, they actually have sex. In other versions of the story, the majority of the versions of the story, she hovers above him and she receives like an immaculate conception. And part of that hovering may be because of Osiris' belt points to Osiris's womb. So it's not a direct connection. So when they was looking at the stars, that's why they did the set. They proclaimed the hovering. And then, of course, that impregnation creates Horus, the sun god. Now, after his impregnating his wife, Osiris goes, and he doesn't ascend to the heavens, but he goes to heaven. He goes to the Nubio-Kemetic version of heaven, which they believe was underground. So when they say the underworld, it's not comparative to Hades, it's not comparative to hell, it's comparative to heaven. Because if you get into the underworld, you're able to go into the field of reeds, then you are living this blissful heavenly life, where Osiris is now lord over it. Anubis was originally the lord over it, but Osiris took his place, and now Anubis just presides over the judges when your heart is being measured by a feather. Now, of course, so we have the similarities Although Judas was not Jesus's brother, we have the similarity of Judas. We have a Judas-like event with his brother Seth, who tricks him into getting in this casket and then kills him. Kind of Cain and Abelish as well. But Judas set forward the process. Judas set forward the process that was going to eventually cause Jesus' first death. Right? Well, cause him to die. We have the Immaculate Conception within the story. We have the son being born, Horus, on the 25th. And we have Osiris going into heaven to preside over heaven in the same way that Jesus is supposedly presiding, sitting at the right hand of the Father, being Trinitarian, all three into one kind of situation. When the Trinity for the Nubio-Kemetic people was the Father, Osiris, the Holy Spirit, which is the Mother, Isis, and then the Son, Horus, the Osiris, Set, and Heru. So these would have been your holy. This is your Trinity, your Trinitarian mindset. That pathway for Trinity is already there. So the only thing that was missing from the Old Testament was the Jesus, the Son character, because the Old Testament does talk about the Spirit of God. But if the devil was going back to try to change and add, he did a very poor job. There should have been, he could have made more similarities, but yet he did. Y'all know that was a setup, right? Y'all know I'll just say y'all up for that. There are more and more similarities. When you look at the story of Horus, being born on December 25th as the Son of God, being born in an Immaculate Conception, that he was called the King of Kings, that he resurrected one of his best friends, that he was teaching at age 12, that he had 12 disciples, that he fought an event. Horus fought against his, the Set is considered like the devil to a certain extent, or he fought against Set. Now, the difference between Christianity and the rest of them is that in the Nubio-Kemetic, at least Set had a level of redemption. He was redeemed later by his father. But the father of Horus died and then was resurrected and reigns over heaven. See, now one thing, we're not saying that these are complete cut and paste, but they are taking themes. The Jesus story, as well as the Old Testament, the whole Bible, takes themes from others. Let me give you one that you probably never even thought about. I'm gonna ask the question though. I know it's on delay, but I'm gonna wait and I'm gonna see if I get some answers. I'll go into some more stuff while I'm waiting. How many of you have read the Iliad and the Odyssey? How many of you remember reading the Iliad and the Odyssey? Because there are themes taken from the Iliad and the Odyssey. If you can see that there are some themes from the Iliad and the Odyssey that is in the Bible. High school. Y'all know my coffee was messed up yesterday. My coffee is right today. Coffee and the cigar. Maylock said he never heard of it. Wow. What country are you in? I'm just curious. Well, where do you live? I shouldn't say what country, as if every American has ever read it. Because actually, you know what? I don't think Iliad and Odyssey are read in schools anymore. Debbie says no. Okay, so Homer's Iliad and Odyssey. Uh, it's a Greek tale by this guy named Homer. You guys have probably seen so many movies that were inspired by this book, by this story, this poem and story. Uh, the mermaids, sirens, cyclops, a lot of those things are themed by that. The city of Troy was a myth, was believed to be a myth until one archaeologist used the Iliad to find the city of Troy. So the Iliad is the battle between Greece and Troy, and the whole Trojan horse. That's where that comes from, the Trojan horse and all that. So in this story of the Iliad portion of the story, because the Odyssey is when Odysseus is leaving the battle after they defeat Troy, and Odysseus is leaving, heading back to Greece, and his journey is going back to Greece. It's a great story. So in this story, Hector, who is the prince, the son of the king of Troy, they worship the god Apollo, the sun god Apollo. This is also where we get Achilles. He worships the sun god Apollo. Watch the movie Troy. It's close. The movie Troy is a good depiction of the Iliad. But Hector, because you heard of Helen of Troy. I'm sorry. I know I keep throwing back and forth. It's just I'm just trying to give you references of pop culture things that you might have heard of, like the Helen of Troy, Trojans, the Trojan horse, that's a Trojan horse. They're trying to trick me, that kind of thing. So these come from the Iliad and the Odyssey. But in this story, right before Achilles is about to kill Hector, Hector calls out to the sun god Apollo, questioning why have you forsaken me? Why have you left me? He asked Apollo, you in my time of need, you have left me, and now this Greek is about to kill me. So we know that this Jesus on the cross, right before he dies, he's calling out to his deity. Well, hell, depending on which version of the gospel you read, they know not what they do. Why hast thou forsaken me? And it is finished. He says, you don't know which one he says. But Hector makes this same call out to the sun god Apollo. Right? And if that was the only thing, that would be like, okay, people calling out at their death, no big deal. Yeah, whatever. Right? In the Odyssey, you have I'm gonna forget her name. Eurycletes. Remember the name Eurycletes. Iphicletes. It's something like that. There is this whole scene where in the Odyssey, Homer and his guys roll up to this island. It's an island of cannibals, right? So keep in mind cannibals. They roll up to an island of cannibals. The cannibals are like, they utilize, in their instance, a woman she's a water bearer. And Odysseus tells his people, follow the water barrier and we'll go into their house and that's where we'll be. That's where we'll eat. Well, they go in and they follow this water barrier to the house. They go into the house. They sit down. There's a woman named, and they think it's Iphicletus. It's something like that. God dang it. But anyway, she comes in and washes Odysseus' feet. When she washes feet, he tells her she'll be known forever, right? But her name in Greek literally means known far and wide, right? Known far and wide. So whatever the Greek name for known far and wide, that's this woman's name. But she is the one who comes and washes his feet. And then when she washes his feet, the cannibals come and they start killing Odysseus' people, eating their body and drinking their blood. Odysseus and his guys, only one ship, the Odysseus ship and the ship and his crew are the only ones who survived that encounter. And I don't want to say there was 12 ships, but I don't remember. There was multiple ships. I don't know how many, but I think the number of ships are close to the number of disciples. So we know, and think about it, when these men got to that island, they thought they was about to, everything's going to be good. The Bible talks about how Jesus, the disciples said, where should we go? They said, go find a man carrying a pitcher of water, a water bearer, follow him into his house, go into his upper room. That's where we'll be, right? Same as Odysseus. Follow a water bearer, go into his house. That's where we're going to meet up at. They do the same thing. After they get to the house, a woman washes Jesus' feet. Medea washes his feet. And he tells her that her name will be known far and wide, which is the same thing Odysseus, the name of the woman who washes Odysseus' feet, her name in Greek means the exact same thing. It means to be known far and wide. And in this case, Jesus is like, this is my body, this is my blood, y'all eat it, let's have some cannibalism. In the Odysseus story, they're attacked by cannibals. And then, of course, Jesus dies. Later on, Odysseus escapes and all that sort of thing. So you can even see motifs from the Odysseus, the Iliad and the Odyssey being utilized. And here's the thing about it. Greek was very well known in this portion of the Roman Empire. And they would have known all these Greek stories. They would have known the story of they would have known the Bacchae. That the Bacchae was like, it was like the color purple is the black people. Generation after generation. Them jokers know the color purple. My daughters can quote the color purple. So the Bacchae was like that. The Iliad and the Odyssey was like that. Incredibly well-known stories that would have been familiar to most people. Even if you had never seen the play, there were themes of it that have reached pop culture. Just like I'm sure for the people on here who have never read the Iliad or the Odyssey, once I started naming certain things, Helen of Troy, Achilles and Achilles heel, your Achilles tendon, there's the Trojan horse. You're familiar with those themes because that's how well known or how much it impacted society that we still use terminology based on those things. So this was the color purple back then. This is, if that's still that relevant today, how much more relevant was it back then? And remember, the people in this area, yes, some spoke Aramaic, but they spoke Greek. To communicate with the Romans, they spoke Greek. Oh. There's a heavy Greek influence in it, which is why you see these things from Dionysius and you see these things, and most people don't realize the similarities with the Iliad and the Odyssey. You're talking about a water barrier. I was just telling a few believers about this in the Bible. No, most people don't. Most of them ain't read it. Oh, of course not. But now I like to stick to stories that they had access to. Like they would have had access to the story of Atticus. He was born to a virgin in the same way on December 25th. And we know that the reason why it's always December 25th, because that's the winter solstice. That's when the day starts to be longer than the night. And they believe that they will survive winter. If they've made it that far, then they're going to survive winter. Because they know that all they have to do is make it to the spring equinox and they'll be good to go. right? So, of course, we understand that. And all of them have the die for 3 days or in the grave for 3 days because the sun stops setting south and sets in the same spot for 3 days, and then it begins to start setting north. So Atticus, being a sun deity as well, was in the grave, died for 3 days, and then was resurrected again. Right now, Atticus shares the crucifixion story. That this is a Greek god, and he was crucified. Crucifixion wasn't a Roman invention. Crucifixion was something that had been around for a minute. So we're going to have those types of stories. So it's not uncommon, it's not impossible to have a crucifixion prior to Jesus. It was a common occurrence. So we know we have Atticus, which was a Greek story. Now, some people think that bringing Krishna in is a reach. Most people don't know where Krishna was just one iteration of Vishnu. Krishna been born. This is his. I think we're in the 10th, or no, they're waiting on the 10th. The next iteration of will be the 10th. But Krishna was one of the more popular ones in around 900 BCE, right? But we have evidence that at the Roman quarry that's outside of Nazareth, that there were Buddhists and Hindus who were in that region, that the Kemetic people traded with the people in India. Alexander the Greek made it all the way to India. So there was a connection, an exchange of knowledge. And the Ptolemies thankfully wanted to collect all of the information they possibly could. So the information that they would have collected in India would have reached the Nubio-Kemetic area, which would mean they would have reached the Levant, since all of that was controlled by the same people, right? Caesar Octavius nor Caesar Tiberius documented anything about Christians, yet this is not acknowledged. That is true. I don't recall, because Jesus supposedly died during the time frame of Tiberius, and to my knowledge, yeah, they don't mention anything about Christians at all. You don't get Christians until you get the Flavian dynasty. That's when you start hearing about Christians, which is the Flavian dynasty starts, 67? Around 67. And then you don't hear Tacitus until 116, 120. Yeah, I never thought about that. Tiberius doesn't say, no one in Tiberius's people say anything about that. And we know Vespasian was good for backdating. So even the whole thing about Nero, it may or may not be. But Krishna. Every time Krishna is resurrected, or this version, the newest version of Vishnu is resurrected, he's always resurrected from a virgin. Always from a virgin. He shares the being born with the star in the east as a sign of his birth. Not only did he perform miracles and is consistently and continuously resurrected, but he also fought against the devil. He had their version of the devil, but it was more like a demon, a superpowered demon. But he came to fight a superpowered demon that was bringing darkness on the world, that was destroying the world. It wasn't like he was just trying to pick a chosen people, but every time he comes back and is resurrected, it's because the world is in calamity. One time he comes back as this little baby, looking dude. I don't ask me to pronounce the name right because I'm not. But he comes back as this little baby, and he only had to subjugate a king, who during this time frame he had one of the largest empires that the Indian people had ever experienced. So he only had to subjugate this king because people's worldview was that the entire world was their area. You know, as far as they knew, they had barriers. They put their own barriers on themselves. But we do have that Vishnu and his has some. I mean, Krishna has some of those same similarities. Question: I recall a story that the New Testament was not written until around after 300. No, the New Testament Gospels and other writings were being written from around 70 AD forward. You do have some manuscripts or pieces of manuscript that have been found that dates back to early first century. Most of it is second century. And then, but by the time you get to 300, you got some pretty decent, you got a decent amount of gospel. You see, writing those New Testament gospels became a fad. It became a money-making thing. It became a popular thing. It would be, it's like, you ever notice how somebody can write an original movie and then all of a sudden you see like 7 variations of that same movie start coming out because it made so much money or it was very popular? But it was kind of Blair Witch Project. Blair Witch Project came out. Nobody was using first-person hand shaky cams. But then all of a sudden you start seeing a bunch of big movies use that same technique, right? It was obscure at first, but then it gained some popularity. So Christianity was initiated, as far as the evidence that I can evaluate, was initiated by the Vespasian in order to shut down the Messianic Jewish movement to make a docile version of Judaism. 3 or 4 people engaged in the first writing, and then it just grew and grew and grew. And people start writing their own doctrines. Right, and you're right. The book of John was inserted, and that wasn't written until like 160 or something like that. Or at the earliest 120. But it was definitely in like the 2nd century. The 4 Gospels, 40 to 70 AD. Yeah, it would have been that. People just telling stories. But I don't even think they was telling that story from 40 to 70. It's more likely that Josephus, in league with Philo of Alexander, began writing that, and Herod. I think it would have been like Herod Agrippa or Herod the third or fourth, that they started conspiring to write this at the behest of Vespasian in order to shut down the Jewish people, create some more docile version of Judaism. They wanted them to believe that their Messiah had already came and that he was and that the kingdom wasn't a warring kingdom against Rome. And in all actuality, they used the writings of it's not Elijah, Isaiah. Those writings of Isaiah were applied to Vespasian at that time frame in order to induct him and Titus as gods in the imperial religion. So they used those writings, the Jewish writings, for their own purpose. So the idea of them repurposing, writing a new religion is not absurd. It's not. But then it took its own, as with many things, you start something it goes off into its own world. It starts to develop out of the control of the original people who control it. And it somewhat wind up doing that. It ain't somewhat, it wind up doing that. And then after a generation, people just believe it. Right? Tacitus wasn't writing about the validity of Christianity or Jesus or any of those things. He was just writing about the validity that there were people in 116, 120 who believed that there was this guy almost 100 years ago who died on the cross for your sins, who was walking around. He just wrote that people believe that. And if you think about 100 years after all so-called events have happened in their time frame, don't think about it in our time frame. Our time frame is different. It's 2023. I had to think about it. Yes, I did. It's 2023. We can find video and pictures of the 1920s, right? So 100 years ago for us, we can validate things more so. You know, we can see pictures, we can see video, we can prove that the Roaring Twenties was happening and people was going to the underground nightclubs and booze was being broken over the street with, you know, since not what do they call it, prohibition. Like, we got video proof. They didn't have any video proof. This was all based on if somebody said it, if enough people believed it, that's all that mattered. If enough people in authority believe it, that's all that mattered. Once you start having your church fathers like Irenaeus in the 180s and Justin Martyr, that starts bringing validity to it. Because why would any highfalutin, well-respected person believe in such tales? Unless it gave them power. And some of them might have believed it for real. But one of the things of the dynamics of power is that when a new thing starts to happen, if you get in early enough at the right time with the right message, you have enough charisma, you can obtain power over people. It was one thing when some of the scrubs got involved with crypto, but once some of the big people got involved with crypto, it legitimized crypto for the other people who don't know enough about it or who are not going to be able to buy it enough. It legitimized it. And then once it's legitimized, people believe that it has value. And if you think about it, crypto is not backed by anything other than belief and emotions. It's not backed by gold or anything like that. I know America is not backed by gold, but we're backed by a hella military. If you really think about our dollar, our economy, it's backed by the military. Mess with America if you want to. So those people back then, the burden of proof was much lower. You took the word of the governor. You took the word of somebody who had some money. If they got money, you take their word. If they got charisma, you take their word. Is there a verse in Revelation that states, paraphrasing, after the battle between heaven and hell, we will be in a time beyond the Bible? Thanks again. I recall reading something similar to that. Well, yeah, because then it's all done. It'll be like you're supposed to just exist in heaven forever, praising God forever. And everybody else who doesn't believe in this deity will be in hell, burning for all eternity. So that would be the time after. I think most of us don't understand religion was used at the government level before it was social, most assuredly. As I said in the introduction of this video, or was that on the video that I was making that I don't like and I'm going to have to remake it? I don't know if I said it in this one or one in the, but either way, in any case, One of the things that you cannot do is take the mindset that you have today, take the culture that we live in today, and apply it to the people back then. Although there are certain similarities. The government is still involved in religion, but not as heavily involved in religion as it used to be. We can see the decline in government involvement in religion really only over the last maybe 50, 60 years that the government has not pushed religion or backed religion. Prior to that, even in the American government, it's supposed to be a separation of church and state. Most of the laws were based on what they believe Christianity's interpretations of life should be. The first Europeans that came over here left because they wanted to practice their religion freely without the interference of the king, King George. Well, not King George. It was somebody else before that. But they wanted to practice their religion without the interference of government. And they believed government was promoting a vile version of the religion. And no matter what culture you look at, religion and state were not separated. The king or the chief or the ruler or the emperor was always a vessel that was inspired by the God. The God put them there. Just as the Bible says that whatever government you're born under is the government God wanted you under, and whatever ruler is put in place was put in place by God. That is the same mentality that Vespasian or the Roman Empire had, which is why Vespasian was able to use the Jewish writings in order to validate himself as a god. Now, he also used the Kemetic Greek writings of Serapis to validate himself as a god, and therefore making his son Titus the son of God. Right? Religion is self-perpetuating even through the age of information. It's the age of information, but if people don't want to drink, they're not going to drink. And some of them, they hold it in their mouth, but they never swallow it down. That belief is incredibly strong. There was this drawing. I remember when I was studying Plato, there was this drawing idea that Plato used. Let's see if I can do it right. I ain't done this in a long time. I ain't do it all the way I want to do it. But in this drawing, I remember taking in philosophy school, in philosophy class, when we studied Plato, there is truth and then there's belief. Now, most people have and the UN stands for unsubstantiated truth. And that's where most people, you got some people who are just purely on truth, and if it ain't facts, they ain't going with it. Then you got those who are purely on belief. They don't give a damn how many facts you give them. Then you have some of those who take some truth, massage that truth, and it's an unsubstantiated truth, unsubstantiated belief. But then there's a little circle in there. That little circle is knowledge. It represents knowledge, true knowledge. True knowledge is when, yes, some things are going to be belief oriented because we're not going to be able to prove everything. But you only validate it when you have enough evidence that the theory is most likely. And of course, we live in truth always. But most people think they're living in a truth, that they got facts. They really don't. Venn diagram, is that what that's called? Because I'm talking about, when did I take philosophy? I was in Germany. So that would have been like 94, 95. Skybox. What's up, man? Oh, so I don't want to get too far away before I got to get one of my all-time favorite guys in there that Jesus story has similarities to. Now, okay, before I go there, for the folks who've never read the Iliad or the Odyssey, would you at least are you interested in reading that now? And for those who've never read the Bacchae, are you interested in reading the Bacchae now? No. Because part of the reason why I do this is because I want to inspire people to go and study stuff and read stuff. Right? And I think people will be surprised when you're reading something and you have an open mind to say it, and well, it's been sparked in you that in the Bacchae, when you're watching Pantheist, you're gonna be like, oh shit, that sounds like Paul. And when now, because any other time you could have been reading the Iliad or the Odyssey, and it may not have connected and said, wait, them going following the water bearer into a house, and then this girl who's watching his feet, her name means you'll to be known wide and beyond. It's just like the Jesus and them going into the house of a water barrier and a woman watching his feet and him telling her that her name will be known wide and beyond. And then them being eaten by cannibals is just like the cannibalism that they was doing during the whole Last Supper routine. And Hector calling out to his God, to the sun god, about being forsaken by him, and we know that Jesus is pretty much just another sun god. It's like when you read something with new information, it comes back different. That's one reason why I wish I had my old library, but I used to read my library over and over again. And like people used to be like, why are you reading the same book? Didn't I see you reading that book like a year ago or 2 years ago? Well, yes, this is true. But I started reading this other book and I read this other book. And now after I read that book and I come back to this book, there's some things I wasn't connecting or getting with this book. So that's why it's always good to go back and reread books. I was going to ignore this, but I gotta. This is something I'm curious. I'm not fly on the wall. Please don't take this disrespectfully. All right. Please don't take this disrespectfully. Grand Rising Healing Light. So you just gave a whole call out in the name of Lucifer, right? I've never understood Luciferians in the sense that it is easily documented and easily realized to me that Lucifer is not a being. It is the planet Venus. That Lucifer, meaning which is a Greek word, which means the light bearer, could have never been an angel in heaven, because all angels in heaven, according to where you would have derived it from, last name end with L, so that is of God. Lucifer name does not. And it just means the light bearer, which is planet Venus, as it is visible right where the sun is going to rise. And then as the sun rises, Venus appears to drop in the sky and fall. Right? So you're saying Lucifer is a concept, an idea, a way of life. So, okay, I've never heard anybody who professes Luciferianism as that. They always are talking about being. You're the first person I've ever encountered that says a concept. What is that concept? Is it based on illumination? Coming into enlightenment? And what is that enlightenment? I'm just really curious. Right. In Revelation, Jesus called himself Lucifer. I would love to find those lost and hidden libraries of the Vatican and Alexandria. Nero burned Rome and that library just to see what was hidden. Oh, I would love to. I noticed this. There's a little bit of wrongness to this, but it's probably the only way it's going to happen. I would love to conquer the Vatican City, right? Vatican City is its own city state. It's his own country, right? I would love to conquer the Vatican City. For the only reason is to allow everything in that damn library that they currently have to be revealed to the public. You're a church. You're supposed to be the church of God. You're hiding so many things. So I would, for that reason alone. And I think that was it Leo the 10th was the one who burned Alexandria. I think he probably took everything out, took it to Rome, and put it in the Vatican Library. And then the question would be, in the subsequent burnings of Rome, did that library get burnt then? Or was it saved by some measure? So yeah, because they got some stuff. I've been in the Vatican Library. Now, you only gonna look at what you have been authorized to look at. You try to go look at that over there, and the Swiss Guard will real quick. Self-enlightenment, knowing that in your hand lies the dominion of the heavens and the earth. Okay. I can get down with that thought process. Fly on the wall. The Vatican is the Mecca for us Satanists. See, now you just threw me off. Because Satan is not a being. It's a being. It's not a being either. It's a title. It comes from the Sumerian word Satan, which means the administrator. But it's not an actual being. The Satan, that's an office to hold, much like Enlil was the Satan over Earth. So in the Sumerian, which is the oldest word, time is the first time and the oldest version of that word that we have. The Satan is not a Hebrew word. It was later incorporated in the Aramaic and Hebrew. But he was, whoever was in charge of Earth was the Satan. So he was the administrator over Earth. And then later on that got conflated into, the serpent and Lucifer and the Satan and the devil and the beast all got wrapped up into one. This is why I always go back to the oldest version of something, because you can't go with for me, you can't go with the meaning of something at a certain period. Now you can look at what it meant to those people at that time frame. But when we're talking about just pure truth, I gotta go back as far as we can go. Now, there are two Satan in the Bible. The Old Testament Satan was a messenger of Jehovah. The New Testament Satan, on the other hand, is the position as an enemy of the God of the Old Testament. It does go through that, and that's what I'm saying, how it meant something back here, and then it means something else when people rewrite it, redoctrinalize it, and now it means something else in the same way that doctrines have changed today. I just stick with the old part. Like because when there's the pursuit of truth of what people thought, but then there's just the pursuit of truth. So I separate those two and say, okay, for understanding, I'm going to get the facts of the pursuit of what people thought. But for my own enlightenment, I got to go to the earliest thing that I got. Okay, you think that Paul was a Satanist, a New Testament style Satanist, in the way that, oh shit, I don't want to mess up your name. Akonjin? Is it Akonjin? Akonjin. No, it's not a jinn. Akonji. The last name is probably Agan. I'm gonna go with Agan. Let's say Agan. So it will be Paul, and since Paul was in the Old Testament, his doctrine mentality would have been this older Akonji. Okay, got it. Akonji. Akonji. Let me say it faster together. Akonji. Got it. All right. Right. Literal versus interpreted. Right. And see, I don't like to go with doctrines. When it comes to my own personal enlightenment, doctrine can kick rocks. I'm gonna go back to the facts of what it meant in its earliest formation, and then I'll go from there. And then that's what it means. But you think that Paul was a Satanist whose mission was to destroy the law of Christ and bring pagan rituals into Christianity? Oh, most assuredly. We can do, and we're not going to do it today because I don't have notes for it. Because for that, I would have to get some notes. I would have to write down my notes in order to keep everything square. There's definitely a huge ass difference between Paul's version of Christianity, that's what they call it, Paulinian Christianity, and Jesus' style of Christianity, or at least I wouldn't call it Jesus Christianity. I'd call it the Gospels Christianity versus Paulinian Christianity. Because Paul for Paul, it's you ain't got to do no work; it's all about beliefs. But in the Gospels, it's not. Yeah, you got to put some work in. But maybe I'll write down some notes for that for tomorrow or Monday. We'll see. It's depending on how my day goes today. Because I got some other things to work on too. But, we're going to get away from it. I did want to talk about one more. Got my notes up. One more guy. Good old Mithra. Good old Mithra. Grand Rising Norman, how you doing? No, I don't believe Paul existed either. We'll do a lot about that, but not today. Not today. All right, tomorrow we will do Paul versus Jesus. Tomorrow. I had a plan for today. But plus for Paul versus Jesus, that's one where I need to write down the different scriptures. I need to be able to utilize the scriptures for that, the different writings for it, to do that comparison. I wouldn't want to, most of these lives I can do from the top of my dome, but that's one of those ones where if I'm going to compare, I need to have my notes. Okay. So let me get that. So hold on. On that discussion till tomorrow. See, that's also marketing right there to make y'all come back tomorrow. But anyway, so my guy Mithra. Now we know that Mithra in the Mithraic story, and we know that Constantine he worshipped both Mithra and he worshipped Apollo. All right. So y'all leave the Paul stuff alone, Diana. Wait till tomorrow, Diane. Tomorrow. Well, y'all delayed. I forget. This is like 2 minutes behind, or a minute or so behind. So my guy Mithra. One of the reasons why the story of Mithra is so interesting to me is because it all came down to politics, to be honest. Mithra had probably the best case for becoming the dominant religion of Rome before Christianity. If you wanted to compare the two, and it came down to politics and money as to why Mithra lost out to Jesus. But we know that Mithra was born of a virgin. Of course, he's born on December 25th. He ran around performing the same damn miracles, healing people who were blind, people who had physical ailments, casting out demons. He performed all these same miracles, feeding a bunch of people. He is the most Jesus-like character than any of them. And I'm going to tell you why. Well, and one of those reasons because Mithra was incredibly popular in the Roman Empire, right? And he died for 3 days, and then he rose from the grave. Anybody who born on December 25th, they all died for 3 days and was resurrected. But we know that's a astrological event that happens every year. But the most interesting thing to me about Mithra isn't so much the similarity between him and Jesus, as much as it's the economic and political influence that almost made Mithra the guy that Constantine was going to back. You see, the problem with Mithra and religion itself, that religion lived in its own caste system during the Roman Empire, just like how the Spanish had caste systems in Central America. Christianity and most other religions were allowed for anybody, right? But mostly the poor people worship Christianity. Mithraism was primarily for your military people, but mid-level military. So in today's world, it would be like your non-commissioned officers in the Marine Corps and your officer, and some of your officers, your lower ranking officers, they worship Mithra. Now you're lower than that military personnel, your E3s, E2s, E1s, they could worship Christianity and all these other deities, right? No, the Bible doesn't say that Jesus was born on the 25th. Actually, if you look at the Bible, he would have been born like in April or something like that. But I'll get to that one in a minute. Ricky. But so, and then of course, the worship of Apollo was for your higher ranking enlisted and your higher ranking officers, your generals, your masters, your sergeant majors, your master sergeants. They could worship Apollo. Apollo was for the rich people. And of course, the imperial religion was for the royalty and the Senate and all those sorts of things. The only reason Mithraism didn't become the primary religion for Rome is because it would have upset the balance of the caste system. Because the super rich and more powerful wasn't going to worship this peasant, Well, let me rephrase. It's amazing that Christianity became that, because the super powerful, the fact that they began to worship this peasant religion, is interesting. But Theodosius is the one who went that route. If Constantine would have had his way, more than likely he would have pushed Mithraism to be the religion of Rome if he would have went that far with it. Instead, he just legalized it because he had Christians in his army, and they were, the cannon fodder troops. They were the lower ranking troops. When I went to Hadrian's Wall, I saw that they had temple. They had a makeshift temple for Apollo, a makeshift temple for Mithra, and then there were these small little makeshift temples for Christianity. And then when I went throughout Syria and all these other places where Maxentius, Anatolia, where Maxentius was, he had a lot more Christian temples at the sites where he was at. So when Constantine defeated Maxentius, he recognized that now that the army is unified, he had a bunch of lower ranking Christians in his army. So he had to go ahead and legalize it. And then he propped up those bishops. So if not for so many Christians in Maxentius' army, it is more than likely that Constantine would have promoted Mithraism, since it was more popular in his army than Christianity. And that is one of the major reasons why we got Christianity today as such a prominent religion. Because the Roman emperor has to win the army over in order for them to be successful. And the fact that Theodosius realized that as well, that the Christianity was growing in the military, because you got to think about it. The time between Constantine and Theodosius is not that much time. 325 at the Council of Nicaea to 380 when all of Rome was declared Christian. So during that little, 60 year time frame, right? Christianity, it is Mithraism 2.0. Mithraism is in the more, after the 4th century, the 4th and 5th century became the more dominant version of Christianity that was followed. Now, my man say, did the Bible say Jesus was born on December 25th? No, it doesn't. If you actually look at how the Bible, it doesn't say when he was born at all, does it? Which is interesting, because when you're reading the Old Testament, and the Old Testament was the Pentateuch portion of the Old Testament, was put together after the Babylonian captivity. In many of the situations of prominence, it gives you the month to which something happens, right? This is one reason why I know there's Roman influence in this, and it was, or Hellenistic Jews were involved in this, which all the Jews who wrote this, Josephus, Herod, Philo, Hellenistic Jews, in league with the Roman government, they didn't care to follow the techniques of the Old Testament and give months and dates, months, whatever month something happened, like the Old Testament was doing. It was different. They left it more ambiguous. But when you look at the context of the writing, it says that an angel came and visited. The angel came and visited these shepherds out in the field to let them know that this child was born, and he visited them at night. I've been in Israel in December and February. The first time I went was December. The second time I went was February. Hey, y'all, even in modern day, at night, the people who were still herding animals, they were not outside at night with their animals. I know it looks it's a desert, but it was cold as hell. I'm talking, it was decent during the day. It was still, you needed a jacket. You was still kind of chilly. But at night, when that water, that wind started coming up off that water from the Mediterranean, whoo! And yeah, it's a few little mountains, but ain't nothing to really block that stuff. It cold. And I remember being there, and going over that with this guy David Hasid, and he was like, "Look, man, it's too cold, and especially back then, you would not have had shepherds out in the fields during that time frame." So he couldn't have been born in December. It would have been too cold for those shepherds to be out there. And what was the other part? There was another thing. What was the other? Oh. There was another aspect of that. Now at one of the ecumenical councils, they wanted to figure out when was Jesus born. They wanted to figure out when he was born. And what they wanted to do was make sure that it matched up. Because a lot of people go to the whole worship of the Saturnalia, and that's when they made it December 25th, so that it matched up with the Saturnalia, since they was already doing the Saturnalia. But it actually had more to do with making sure the resurrection happened at the spring equinox. So they placed the birth so that, well, they placed the Immaculate Inception at such a time that he would be born when the sun would start defeating the day, and then the resurrection would happen at the spring equinox. They made it an astrological event. In either way that you look at it, they wanted to make it fit with what was going on in the sky. I was trying to see if I could quickly find to see if there was anything that showed an exact time frame or somewhat of a time frame. Because we may not know the time frame to which the census in Rome happened. We know that the only census in Judea happened in 6 CE. There was none before that, which of course doesn't work because Herod the Great died in 4 BCE. And supposedly Herod the Great was the one who had dealt with the wise people, the wizards. But on a quick look, it's not giving me the dates to which, or even a month, that the census by Quirinius' census was actually taken. It's just in around the 6th century. But an exact date, exact time frame, I'm not getting. Even it would have been, but what I would say is I doubt very much so that it would have been done in the winter time. And this Roman census didn't force people to go back to their ancestry home. That wouldn't have made sense, because Quirinius, the area that the census was taken in Judea, wasn't part of Herod's little puppet domain, Herod the Great. So they wouldn't have forced people to leave the area that they actually live in to come to another area to take a census for taxation, and then for those people to go back. Like, there's never been a census in the Roman Empire that's ever required you to go to your ancestry home. Didn't Constantine want to be baptized by Aries after and asked him to come back after being excommunicated from the Catholic Church? No. Constantine never wanted to be baptized. Constantine's mother became Christian after the Council of Nicaea. Constantine never became Christian. After Constantine died, his mother had the bishops baptize him post-mortem. So he never requested to be baptized. Constantine died worshiping Mithra and Apollo. Hell, if anything, he died worshiping himself. But yes, Dave, it's more than likely that it was September when he would have been born. Jupiter and Saturn align together every 800 years, and that adds up to an approximate. And they would appear to be a large star. Okay. And that is in relation to what? Like, what would that be? I don't know what that would be in relation to. But yeah, I think even most scholars, even Christian scholars, are beginning to admit that Constantine's baptism is bullshit. But Jupiter and Venus align on August 3rd BC. Okay. The Star of Bethlehem. That still wouldn't fit the Star of Bethlehem. This star moves and then hovers. If you look at the way they wrote about this star, you had men of the East who followed this star to Jerusalem, right? And then once they left Jerusalem, they followed this star south, slightly southeast, but more south to Bethlehem. And the star supposedly hovered over their house, over the house to which Jesus was supposedly at. Now, by this time, Jesus was a toddler. So why is he in it? It doesn't work well with the story because, one, according to the story, depending on which version you're reading, after 8 days, and then Mary is clean, Jesus is clean, Jesus gets a name, consecrated in the synagogue, they go back to Nazareth. In the other story, they go down to Egypt. So how does the wise man come to Bethlehem to see a toddler? He would not have been there. He'd have been in Nazareth or Egypt, depending on which version that you go with. But right, a UFO or a helicopter. Well, a UFO is an unidentified flying object. So to them, a helicopter would be because, and even when I did my video and I said, how do men in the East, if they're coming from Iraq, how do they follow a star in the East but yet go west to Jerusalem? Even if they weren't in Iraq, let's say they were in Egypt, how would they follow a star in the East but go north? Right? You still got to go northeast to do that. It's still not in the East. If they would have went east, they would have went into Saudi Arabia. And then they got to the water and they cross the water, you go into, what's that, Iran. There's absolutely no way you can make it. They would have to have been on the coast, like where Haifa, Israel is at. They have been in Haifa somewhere to go east to follow a star in the east. But yet, how do you follow a star in the east? You would have to be exactly due east of Jerusalem in order to follow a star in the east and end up in Jerusalem. But you cannot follow a star in the east from Jerusalem and end up in Bethlehem, because Bethlehem is very much south of Jerusalem. Not that far. It's only about, it ain't that far. It'll take about 45 minutes in the car. But, and then it hovers over the house. Can't do it. How's it hovering over a house? You got to be in the atmosphere to hover over a house. Oh, we got another Debbie. We got two Debbies. A lot of people go through pains in their relationship. Oh, hell no. Oh, you about to get, what is this? Oh, you one of those. Where do these people get these stupid ass scams from? They're gonna just block you. Not even a timeout. Just block. Just completely block. The audacity of people think they come on people's lives or go on people's videos and post their little bullshit advertisements. That is like the rudest goddamn. That is so rude to me. Hey, I'm gonna come on your live and post a thing about how I've gotten back with my ex-lover, my ex-husband, ex this, and it was all because of this doctor who cast some spells or whatever. Like, people are always trying to find some scam. Anywho, yeah, that whole December 25th being born on that one, that star in the east is just a beast to me. It's like that alone should make a person say, how can this Bible be right? Because a comet, it couldn't have been a comet, because a comet doesn't behave like that. You know, it doesn't have an engine. It can't move. But the hovering over the house part. You can't hover over a house unless you are like a helicopter, Harrier jet, some other unidentified object. And you got to be in the atmosphere to hover over a house. And even if it's Bethlehem was a very small town compared to what we view towns is today. So let's say it's my neighborhood, which I will admit I have never driven around. My house is about the fourth, fifth house when you come into the neighborhood. I have never been inside my neighborhood past my house. So let's say it's 50, 60 houses in this neighborhood. In order for a light to hover over this house, you gotta be like right there, like right there. 50, 60 feet, 100 feet, 200 feet. You know, even a helicopter with a searchlight, you gotta be like helicopter level with a searchlight to be able to shine a light right on top of this house. You can't be, if you're too far up, you shining over the whole neighborhood, right? The farther away you are, the light beam dissipates out wider and wider. So you got to be a certain distance. But a star did this. And how does a Christian today reconcile that? That a star, they said it was a star. We know stars are, other than the sun, stars are billions of miles away. Light years away. How in the hell does a star do that? When they say church hurt, I say logic. I don't need a person to disappoint me to walk away from this book. The book itself disappoints me. That makes me walk away from this book. So unless it was a laser on a UFO, still not a star. God the Father is the light. He lights up heaven. How does that play into a star that hovered over the house? So are you saying, Diane, that the star was actually just God You wouldn't be able to prove that. And that's not what they said. They just said it was a star. And then why would the star be in Bethlehem when by this time frame Jesus is either supposed to be in Nazareth or he's supposed to be in Egypt? So why are they even in Bethlehem? So you still have that issue to deal with. That they were supposed to be in, they weren't even in Bethlehem at the time frame of the wise men, the wizards. It's called faith. But how does your faith jive with the fact that the facts are, according to your book, and I'm assuming you're Christian, according to your book, Jesus, Mary, and Joseph were either told to get up and immediately go to Egypt, or after 8 days, they went back to Nazareth. So by the time the wise men would have shown up, he was already a little taller. They would not have been in Bethlehem. How does your faith supersede that fact that the story doesn't match up? Triple X, you crazy. You're going to file a lawsuit? The church hurt destroyed your ability to critically think, so you're going to follow law. If you win, let me know. Then I'm filing one right behind you. But I really wish I tell you, that damn Comcast. All right, we all still here. We all still here. Comcast, that Xfinity cable. Sometimes we have. Oh. I went out completely on YouTube. Okay, so YouTube is back. Good, good, good. I see a comment from your YouTuber. Good, good, good. To me, the long and short story, if we are going to believe in the Bible, we should believe in the Old Testament. You should. To me, long story short, if we're going to believe in the Bible, we should. Oh, it came back twice. Yeah. If you're going to accept the Bible, then you have to take the Old Testament. If you're going to take the Old Testament is crazy. Faith in, I got you, faith in Roman Catholic lore that has nothing to do with what's written in the Bible. Right, because the Roman Catholics say that they are the authority and not the Bible. I don't think many people realize that the Roman Catholics say this, that they are the authority and they can put whatever they want in the Bible, and that their doctrine is actually has more authority over the Bible itself. In the Old Testament, God tells in Exodus 20, it lies me and honor me. Usually I can break down what people are saying when it seems like the auto checks and stuff do their own thing. Oh, actually, since I'm not using it, I can turn the ring. Y'all, since TikTok acts stupid, I can turn the ring thing down so we don't have that. Our ringer doesn't disrupt us anymore. Jesus is not to be idolized. He would be a fraud. Right. you're not supposed to build idols. You're not supposed to have idols of anything on here, on heaven or hell, or on the earth, below the earth, near the earth, birds, nothing. You're not supposed to idolize any of these things, you know. But because they were universally bringing in all these other religions who had idols, they had to keep their idols. Oh, I understand. Echo, that goddamn talking text. I have sent some stuff off, and that auto check, spell check thing, be thinking is I'm saying one thing, but I'm saying something else, has gotten me plenty times, plenty of times. If the person on Twitch could just type hello, I just want to see on StreamYard how make sure that on StreamYard your comment comes through, because I didn't see you follow me. Uh, they didn't tell me that part. But yes, it's I'm hoping that Diane, who's that Diane? I'm back up on, would explain that, would break that down for us of the Christian thought process on that. Because that was one of those catalysts that made me say, okay, there's absolutely no way anybody who believes in Jesus can ever explain this away. That is just error. It's complete error and contradiction in your book. And if there is one error or contradiction, then how do you know what's not an error? What's not a contradiction? It comes down to doctrine of choice at that point. Okay, but before we can even get to the Holy Spirit, Pentecost, and all that, if the birth is errored, then the rest of it is then tainted as well. Because the Holy Spirit is, you can't prove it that it exists. You can't prove that it exists outside of a person's own emotions and trauma that they are experiencing, and an enlightened moment or an aha moment or some highly emotional moment that they go through. This whole story of a Pentecost is similar to what we talked about. You may not have been here at that time frame, but in the Bacchae, it talks about how Dionysius and his followers were out in the woods and they were filled with the Spirit, and then tongues appeared above their heads, speaking and in flames, but not burning their hair. So it's valid. It's a viable thought process that this whole Pentecost thing could have been taken from the Bacchae, which was written about 500 years before Jesus. And then they got to break down the tongues. People were hearing you speak in the language of their native language, but everybody was hearing a different language at the same time on the day of Pentecost, according to this story. And then even that, they were told to remain in Jerusalem until they received that Pentecost. But yet in other versions, they went to Galilee. In other versions, they went to Bethany. So they went to different places, and then they were told to stay in Jerusalem, according to Acts, and then in Acts, they're in Jerusalem to receive the Pentecost. So which is it? Where did they actually go? Did they go to Bethany? Did they go to stay in Jerusalem? Or did they go to Galilee? Because the different gospels are telling you different stories. Oh, I beg to differ, my contract. Let's just Huh. Let's bring this up. Let's just bring this up. Because we did a video on this not too long ago where we compared the resurrection stories. Right? And in comparing those resurrection stories, we saw that there were many differences in those stories of the resurrection. Let's see, where does it start? So in Matthew, it's going to be in Matthew 29. No, that was 28. That we're in 28. All right. About an earthquake, Jesus rose. The women came. Da, 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 Jesus. All right. In Matthew 28, verse 10, then Jesus said to them, do not be afraid. Go tell my brothers to go to Galilee. There they will see me. So they went to Galilee. Then the 11 disciples went to Galilee to the mountain Jesus had told them to go. And when they saw him, they worshiped him. And Jesus said to them that they have authority over the earth that has been given to me, and therefore make disciples of all nations, baptizing them. So they went to Galilee. All right. That's in your Matthew version, Galilee. Everybody got that? In your Mark version, now in your Mark version, everything after verse 8 was added to it. The earlier manuscripts do not have 9 through 20. Everything else was added. So this is later on. Now in Mark, all right, but go tell the disciples, tell Peter, go ahead to Galilee. Mark says Galilee. So Mark and Matthew, they're in agreement. And that's in verse 8. So that's ahead of time. So you went in right now. Diane. I'm looking at Luke. You said they all three agree. They didn't believe the woman. So the woman was like, hey, we don't trust you, woman, so we're going to go and check ourselves. Did my eye? In their fight, the women bowed down and faced the ground, but the men said to them, why do you look for the living among the dead? He is not here. He has remember how he told you while he was still in Galilee. So that's not telling them where they were supposed to go. That's reminding them what he had told them when they were in Galilee, not that they were supposed to go to Galilee. But it will appear in Luke that they were still in Jerusalem when all of this happens, because he ran up to the tomb um, to see what happened for himself. Then there's on the road to Emmaus where he talked to some other people. And then it said they go up and return at once to Jerusalem. They found the 11, and so these people that he met on the road to Emmaus, they found the 11 and those who assembled with them, but they went to Jerusalem and found those who assembled with them and found them and so they're in Jerusalem. They're not in Galilee. So Luke does not agree with Mark or Matthew. And then he led them out of the city in the vicinity of Bethany. And then they worshiped with him, and then they returned back to Jerusalem. So Luke does not agree with Mark and Matthew. So I didn't even go look at John. I just looked at what you gave me. And what you gave me says two of them, Mark and Matthew, agree. Luke does not agree with that. And while we're at it, let's take a gander at John. It would appear that there is no telling of them to, because this is another one where they didn't trust Mary Magdalene. Peter went running over there. She stood at the tomb crying. And she's like, they took my Lord away. He said, why are you crying? And he said, and because she think they stole the body. And then she realized it. And then in this one, she's like, he tell her, don't touch me because I've not yet ascended. But in the other version, she touched his feet. And she went back and told them. So according to John, they still in Jerusalem again. So they never left. They was in either they was in Jerusalem or they was in Galilee. So you see what I'm saying? This is why the Bible doesn't hold up, because it can't. These different authors are writing different things, and they're not in agreement. If these things were in agreement, now some things you can't. Some people say, "Oh, well, this is the perspective of this person. This is the perspective of that person." There's no different perspective as far as where you are. If I die in Atlanta and then I rise again, there's no different perspective if I say, if I'm telling you to, hey, go tell them to meet me in Birmingham. But yet other versions say I met them in Atlanta. No, them two different cities. That ain't a different perspective. That's either one's right or one's wrong. But what they are in is in contradiction of each other. So they don't agree with each other. What about the Essenes and their relation to Jesus? So now I'm behind in the comments. The Essenes, oh shit, I mean, Jesus is thought out in Nazareth, they had people who were Essenes. It is thought of that if Jesus actually existed, he would have been a member of the Essenes. The Essenes were more like Gnostic Jews. So his relation would be that he would have been one of them. And that's why he would have been, the Dead Sea Scrolls are attributed to the Essenes. So it's more likely the scripture, the readings that he would have had, the teachings he would have been from them. Now, the other thing about where the Essenes were is that they were also in contact with people from Buddhist and Hindu. So it's possible they could have learned their ways as well. Well, that makes sense on how someone claiming Christian back then could end up in the gladiatorial dome. I don't understand what you mean by that, Ronnie. It might have been something that I was saying much earlier, as far as what makes sense of. But many people ended up in the gladiatorial dome, not just Christians. Christians didn't have, carte blanche on that. Jewish people don't worship Jesus. You do have some people called Jews for Jesus. They are converted. They're pretty much just Christians who are upholding the law, still uphold the law. Acts 1:9. I usually don't do all of this, but I'm finding it interesting today. But what does Acts 1:9 have to do with anything? After he said that he was taken up before their eyes in a cloud and hid from them out of sight. Don't see the correlation with the fact that they were different, that the gospels don't match. He was taken into a cloud, but which city was he? Was he in Jerusalem or was he in Galilee? Because your gospels don't match up as to where they were located. And Galilee and Jerusalem, that's a pretty good distance, especially when you didn't have a car. Your stepson said that if he rose from the dead, is he a zombie? He would be, because supposedly he rose up with the same body that he died in. He showed those the hands to Thomas, so he would be a zombie. Your stepson actually makes a valid point that Jesus is the king of the zombie apocalypse because he maintained the same body. And similar to the video I did the other day, where I was talking about how the archangel Michael argued with the so-called devil over the body of Moses so that this God would have Moses's body to resurrect again at the end times. So Moses would be a zombie. Now Elijah, Enoch supposedly taken up, never died, but Moses would be a zombie at the wall. Yeah, but oh, that must be towards like, do Jews worship Jesus? Mm-mm. But for the Jewish people, they're absolutely right. He doesn't fulfill the prophecies. He didn't overthrow the government. The Messiah that they talked about was going to be a earthly living warrior king who would overthrow the imperialism of Rome. Jesus didn't do that, but a Muslim dude did. An Arab did it. Now that Messiah story was used for Vespasian, but there was an Arab guy who actually was the one that freed the Jewish people from Roman imperialism. So he would have more claim to the Jewish Messiah than Jesus would. Because Jesus never overthrew anybody. And then the doctrine flipped it up. Oh, it's a kingdom. It's a kingdom here. It's a kingdom up there. This kingdom is spread out. It's all about your love and your emotions and your soul. They were confused in thinking that it was going to be this earthly kingdom that he was going to, set up. But yet in Revelation, there's supposed to be this 1,000-year reign kingdom on earth. So they still come back to the same thing. And that's another reason why Jewish people would not get down with Jesus. And it was more than likely he lost a lot of people when he was talking about, this is my flesh and this is my blood, eat it and drink it. Because the Old Testament Bible clearly tells, and then, we've been going through this in Leviticus on Tuesdays as we've been going reading through this Bible. Well, we're going to read the whole damn thing, but we've been going through it. It was completely outlawed by this God to eat blood, to drink blood, and eat human flesh. And drinking that wine is supposed to be that. And they literally believe, like the Roman Catholics today, the Catholics today literally believe that when they eat that wafer or that piece of bread and they drink that wine, that it transmute into his blood, his body, inside of their body. So although they may consume it as bread and wine, it turns into blood and flesh inside their bodies. Nasty as hell. But that's why Jews wouldn't accept it. But this was something that could have been taken from the Odysseus writing of the writings of the Odyssey, rather. Odysseus is the main character in the Odyssey. Could have been taken from that. But it was also something that Dionysius had previously taught. When you look at the Bacchae, Dionysius had a similar situation of saying, he had a Last Supper. This is my blood, drink it. And it was wine. This is my body, eat it. And it was bread. And they ate it. And he was like, this is a ritual to me for you becoming unionized with me, one with me, joining me. Going back to my comment about the battle of heaven and hell being, what are your thoughts of World War II and King? I don't know who that king is. King Solak? Selassie? Who is King Selassie? Are you talking about Haile Selassie? But I don't think that World War I or World War II got anything to do with the Christian concepts of heaven and hell. Just humans fighting over resources. The Germans were like, hey, after World War I, we don't have resources, we jacked up. And then Hitler was able to come in with the whole Aryan race thing and believe that they should be controlling the world and subjugate everybody. Oh, you know what? I need to have my like King Selassie. So you saying Haile Selassie? He's another person who just claimed to be. Selassie was claiming to be able to maintain his Solomonic dynasty over Ethiopia, to which his predecessors had began claiming in 1270, and was continuing that process of bloodline dynasties of rulership. So, and then that became the Rastafari. But do I think that he was kin to Menelik the First? Was Menelik the First ever kin to Solomon? I don't think he was ever kin to Solomon. I think they were just claiming a dynasty that they knew that people would be subjugated to because of their religious beliefs. Hebrews believe Yeshua was born at the Feast of Tabernacles in Sukkot. What month is that? Healing Light. and Mussolini leading a war against them and losing to spears over tanks and guns, killing Selassie, King Selassie I. Let me tell you why Egypt. I don't know. Well, not say Egypt. I don't know if y'all ever been to Ethiopia. Ethiopia is only conquerable now. Now that we, prior to heavy air units, dropping troops, all of that, Ethiopia is one of those places in the world where it is incredibly difficult to conquer. In the same way Afghanistan. What similarities do they share? High-ass elevations and mountains. The Egyptians could not conquer the Nubian people or the Aksumite people or anybody else who controlled that region of the world. The Arabs could not conquer that region of the world. It is the same, it's the age-old thing in battle. They had the high ground. They had, and they had more than spears. Whoever told you all they had was spears lied to you. They may not have the same level of artillery, but when you have the high ground and you have comparable artillery where they did have mortars, they had rifles. They weren't just sitting up there fighting with just spears. I don't know where that came from. But you can win. And especially look at how long the Afghans held off the Soviet Union. Look at how long they have been holding off America. Ethiopia is mountainous. It's not as cavernous as Afghanistan. So now it's possible that you can conquer Ethiopia because of our aerial warfare. But World War II level of military, you still going to struggle if they have enough stuff going on. If they have enough rifles, enough anti-tank bombs, and when I say bombs, I'm talking about small bombs that a person can come and slap on something, and you have that mountain air high ground. I would never want to. I wouldn't, even in today's military. If I was still in the Marine Corps, I wouldn't want to fight in Afghanistan or Ethiopia, any mountainous region. Hell no. Late September, early October, that would be the more consensus time frame that if Jesus actually existed, he would have been born during that time frame when you look at it in the context of the story. So you believe that Haile Selassie is the next king. Okay. There's absolutely, to me, there's no evidence of that. Just because he was able to withstand more modern day fighting, no. And they have a claim to a throne that you can't prove it. And that claim didn't even really start till 1270, when the first of his line decided that they were part of the Solomon's kingdom. But if that was the case, then why didn't King Azana claim that when he first converted them over to Christianity? He didn't claim that. He claimed Christianity in the 4th century. So he should have, well, really, he was more 4th, almost 5th century when that happened. But for those 300 plus years prior to any of that, to Christianity being so somewhat created, Ethiopia was not a Christian nation. There was very little, if any, Christianity in Ethiopia until King Azana converted them over to Christianity. If there was any Christianity in Ethiopia, it would have been incredibly small sects who were escaping the Roman Empire. Even Rome couldn't conquer Ethiopia during that time frame. And But Haile Selassie, one day somebody gonna come and they're gonna claim to be him, and many will follow. And I honestly, many will be disappointed. And I don't know if you're gonna go follow the way of Waco, Texas, or Jim Jones, but many are going to follow because belief is a hell of a drug. There are many who are gonna follow because he's black. Just because he's black, they're gonna follow. But you can't prove it. And if he performs signs and miracles, they're gonna call him Antichrist. Where are any supposed descendants of Solomon? Many children. There aren't any. There are no descendants of Solomon because there was no actual Solomon. Well, there's no proof of Solomon. There's no proof. There's no physical proof of Solomon. There's no physical proof of David. There's just no proof. And one of the problems that I have, one of the reasons why I won't accept that David or Solomon existed is because David supposedly carved out this kingdom where he ruled this great grand Israelite kingdom. But in all recorded history, there has never been a time when there was this great Israeli kingdom. That area was always being conquered by somebody else, whether it was the Sumerians or the Akkadians, the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites. These are legitimate people groups that existed. Most of the time, they were controlled by Egypt, the Nubio-Kemetic Egypt for a long ass time. There was no, and then came the Babylonians, and after the Assyrians, and then the Greeks, the Persians after them, and then the Greeks after them, and then the Romans after them. And then after the Romans was the Arab nation, and then the Ottomans, and then back to the Christians, and back and forth. There's never been this time frame where Solomon would have had this great kingdom filled with wealth and people traveling to him. So the whole Axiomite story of Sheba of Queen Candace, Makeda, and her name would have been Makeda, not Sheba. Makeda going up to Ethiopia, to Jerusalem to meet him, and then she got pregnant by him and all that kind of stuff. There's zero proof of that. None. Right. The first time you get a state of Israel is 1948. Other than that, it is all stories written by people to create some level of their own history so that they feel better about themselves. Because that's why we got history. That's what we use history for. We don't really use history to say what actually happened. Most people use history or create history to make their group seem like they come from greatness and they did this and we did that. But those people who lived in that area never established this massive kingdom in the whole Levant area. No, never. We can see where Sargon created his empire. We can see where the Hittites created their empire, where, the Akkadians after Sargon committed his, and we can see the Assyrians, and we can see the Babylonians and the Persians and the Greeks and the Romans, but we don't ever see an Israelite kingdom. We see small vassal states of northern Israel, southern Judah, that were allowed to exist during time frames when they were controlled by the Nubio-Kemetic, when it was controlled by the Babylonians, controlled by the Persians, and during the Greek time, they ain't have shit. But we can see that. And then, they had a little that was smaller. They were broken up into smaller vassal states. And we see that same smaller vassal states was happening during the Roman Empire as well. But Other than that, there's no time where they were dominant. Not one time frame where they were dominant. They were consistently being dominated by other groups, by other tribes, other nations. Right? But what group wants to admit that? That's not good history for them. How much power does that God now have if they're always being controlled by somebody else? So they had to fabricate their own story of, Saul, and then David, and then Solomon, History is a lie. History is the biggest lying thing. It's fake news. It's fake news. It's gonna be great. It's gonna be the greatest time. It's all fake news. It's all fake news. The Ethiopian Bible is the oldest and most complete Bible on earth, written in years. An ancient dead language of Ethiopia is nearly 800 years older than King James Version. What does that have to do with King James Version? King James Version wasn't the first complete version that they had. Even though it's older than the Tyndale Bible, it's older than the Geneva Bible. What does that have to do with anything? That is older and most complete. It's not. Not even slightly. The Ethiopian Bible, hold on, let me make sure, because I don't want to say it wrong, but let me make sure I got the right time frame. Let me make sure. Because you don't get an Ethiopian Bible with all 81 books until that was not telling me the date. I mean, I already know what I want to say about that to go against that, but I just want to make sure I have the right time frame. What is the goddamn time frame of this book? All right, I thought so. All right. So the Ethiopian Bible, the current version of it is a 17th century book, but it has an earlier replica of the 15th century. All right, 15th century. So what's the 15th century? The 15th century is going to be your 1400s. All right. All right, Eco. So understand, you're talking about the Ethiopian Bible being the oldest from an earlier manuscript, 1700s flourished, from an older manuscript from the 1500s, meaning the 1400s. Yes, this is prior to the King James Bible. But you know what it's not prior to? It's not prior to the Vulgate and the Septuagint. It's not prior to the canonization of the Bible that was completed in and around 360 CE. 360 CE. And then you did have ecumenical councils that kind of play with what's in, what's out, what's in, what's out. All right. It has 81 books, not 100 books in it. It's 81. But you still don't have this until then. And then you don't even have Ethiopia becoming a Christian nation until almost 400 CE. And the canonized Bible for the Romans was already completed by that time frame. No, fourth century, actually fourth or fifth century, is when Ethiopia became Christian. Norman, when they had their Bible, the Ethiopian Bible, the oldest manuscript of that is 15th century, so 1400s. But the canonization in Rome happened before Ethiopia became Christian. So one, Ethiopia, Christianity didn't start in Ethiopia. Two, the Septuagint was written in BCE. The Vulgate came after that. So you don't have this. And like I said, the Romans canonized their version of the Bible before the Ethiopians even became Christian. And it was a Hellenistic Ethiopian, a Hellenistic Egyptian, which means he was Greek, a Greek Egyptian who actually went into Ethiopia and converted the Axiom Empire by converting King Sana. I think his name is not Jerome. I was about to call him Jerome. Shit, I forgot his name. So you're not. The whole thing about the Ethiopian Bible is a stretch. You're reaching. You're reaching. So the Muratorian canon, which was believed to be dated around 200 AD, is the earliest compilation of canonical texts resembling the New Testament. It was not until the 5th century, which would be in the 400s, that all the different Christian churches came to a basic agreement on the Bible canon. That's almost 1,000 years before the Ethiopian Bible. So you got a whole bunch of time before then. You got a bunch of Bibles before then. And we're talking about by the time you get to 1000 CE, you have a definite canon of the Bible. Original Whitening Giza, HD 100 and closer to the year 500. Google says 500 BC for what? Like what happened in 500 BC? Like what was the question that you asked? And I never said that I knew nothing about Selassie. Don't put words in my mouth. I would have never said that I don't know anything about Selassie. I'm not an expert on it, but I know enough to answer the question to which I was asked. Who arrived in Africa country in the 5th century and is said to have copied them out one day. I've never heard that name, grandma. What? Fermentus. That's what I was trying to think of. In the 4th century, which is what's the 4th century? That's gonna be 400s. So you have Fermentus who introduced Christianity to Ethiopia, converted um, King Azana of the Axiom Empire. Now I want you to think about it logically, though. Think about it logically. If Fermentus came in and converted King Azana to Christianity in the 4th century, and Christianity has already been established in Rome, already been established in Rome, and the canon has already been established in Rome, then there was a Bible already written. There was already a Bible canonized, I should say, that was used to convert the Axiom Empire into it. So the Ethiopian Christianity was not based on an Ethiopian Bible. The manuscript that is now called the Ethiopian Bible is 15th century. So what Axiom Empire was converted over to was probably not the same Bible that is now called the Ethiopian Bible, but would have been one that was canonized by Rome, since this bishop out of Egypt was a Roman, what we would call today a Roman Catholic. But the Grama Gospels are named after African who arrived in the African country in the 5th century. And you're talking 5th century, so I'm talking about 4th century. He come out, hey, how about Chick-fil-A, Skybox? Can I get 50% off Chick-fil-A? The Bishop Bible was replaced by the King James Bible. Mm-hmm. I never even heard of the Bishop Bible. .500 is when the Ethiopian Bible was supposed to have been written. Okay, so you're saying 500, but there again, late 300s is when the Axiom Empire converted to Christianity. So there would have been a Bible that they were using. So there was an older Bible than the Ethiopian Bible that was being used in the 300s to convert the Axiom Empire, which makes the claim of the oldest. And see, what's old is complete. Here's the thing. The Ethiopians say theirs is complete because it has more books. But when they canonized the Bible in Rome, it was complete. So what's complete? King James Bible doesn't have everything that the Roman Bible has. So what's complete is a state of mind when it comes to this. Because if we want to say complete, then the Bible right now, none of them are complete unless they have the writings at Nag Hammadi, unless they have the Dead Sea Scrolls, because then they're not complete, because these are out there. So that claim of completeness is invalid. It's what you believe. It's not factual. You understand what I'm saying? I know you're on delay, but you understand what I'm saying? So, like, this is how, and I hate to say it this way, but it's true. This is how charismatic preachers and teachers get people, because they'll say the Ethiopian Bible is the oldest complete Bible. And people just run, oh, wow, that's the oldest complete one. They won't think about all the other Bibles that was written before. They won't think about the canonization and all these other things. They won't think about all the other books that are still not in it. So because they use the term complete, it makes you think that it has some higher standard. And then they're always comparing it to the King James, right? Because that's the one that most people know. They know the King James. They know the King James. But if we talked about what was done in the 25 years after the Council of Nicaea, which is when the Bible was first canonized, but then even after that, we can go into some of the different ecumenical councils where they argue. And I think it was the one in Laodicea. They took out, like, the Book of Enoch was part of the canon until the Council of Laodicea, and then they took that book out. I believe it was the Council of Laodicea. That was when that one was taken out. So there's been ins and outs of these books for a while. But this complete Ethiopian Bible is not to the 15th century. So you don't even know what they had. If they started writing it in 500, you don't know what they had, what they wrote, if that's the same thing that they had in the 15th century. Because you can't track it. You see what I'm saying? So you don't know if that's actually what they had in 500. But even 500, there was already a Bible that was propped up before the 500, at least 100 years, in the late 300s. So what's complete? But if I was trying to get you to join in with my way of thinking, and I'm some kind of pastor or whatever, I'm going to use that terminology to draw you in. And then if I'm also using race, I'm going to use that to draw you in. Ethiopia, it's a black man. The Bible came out of Africa, right? Even though most of y'all are from West Africa, your heritage, your ancestry goes to West Africa. Most people in this country don't have the phenotype of East Africa. I'm going to draw you in. Yeah, it is. It's all a fraud. It's all like control. It's all control, my boy Samuel is back. He doesn't even know anything about the monks, Nirvana, or Sambu. Right, because I'm supposed to know everything about everything. You show me the person who knows everything about everything, and I show you a fool. I show you a liar. You got dang right. I don't know who you talking about. The monks of Nirvana. I know what monks are. I know what Nirvana is. The monks, about monks Nirvana. You got to be more specific. That's like me saying, "Oh shit, Samuel, you don't even know about Lemishki. You don't even know about Lemishki, so you don't know nothing. You don't know nothing. What do you know about Dumuzi? What do you know about Neharsag, Ilnana, Ishtar? Same person, but what do you know about them? If you can't break down, the relationship between Ilnana and Dumuzi and what happened between the two of them and his resurrection, because we didn't go over Dumuzi being resurrected, you don't know nothing. What? Oh. If you can't tell me about Lama and Lamu, you got to be able to know about Lama and Lamu if you're going to try to tell me about anything. Because if you can't tell me about Lama and Lamu, then you don't know nothing. You see what I'm saying? That's absurdity. That's absurdity. 6% off all vegetables and fruit, but you must repent by Black Friday. I thought I turned this volume off. Dang it. Hold on. Here I am bragging about no volume and volume just playing like it want to play. We're going to put it on vibrate for right now. No, we're just going to put it on mute. I don't even need to see it vibrate. Get on my maybe y'all hear that. Yeah, look. Mass manipulation, as my man said, is a huge scam. That would be amazing. That people can use that to use religion to amaze people is what I meant to say. So we have to be mindful of that because and dig into the details. What the hell? Okay, let's do math, bro. Don't put him in timeout for that one, Angie. Okay, you just said the 15th century would have been the 1400s. Now you're saying the 5th century it's not the 4th century. Okay, you need to learn how to write because that last part didn't make sense. Yes, when the way we evaluate time in this Western mindset, the 15th century is the 1400s because when the Gregorian calendar was put in place, they didn't use 0. They started with the number 1, right? Started with the number 1. So from 0 to 99 is the 1st century. From 100 to 199 is the 2nd century. Because 0 to 99, that's the 1st century. So that's why that's called 1st century, even though it doesn't have a 1 in front of it. And as you continue to go like that, 100 to 199, 2nd century, 200 to 299, 3rd century, 300 to 399, 4th century, 400 to 499, 5th century, and so on and so forth, so that the 1400s are the 15th century. We're in the year 2000, but it's called the 21st century. That's grade school. So yes, what I'm talking about is that when Constantine brought in the Council of Nicaea in the 300s, that would have been the 4th century. So when my man said it happened in the 5th, he said now somebody I could take something back right here because what did he say? When Google says the 500s BC, that's 6th century. So I didn't say that one. I said that one wrong. When he said 500, I might have said 5th century, but I was talking about how in 500, but in that one I was saying how that's in 500 BC, but in the 4th and 5th century is when the Bible was canonized and then Ethiopia became Christian. So no, I'm still right. I don't know what you're talking about. Come on, man. If you're gonna come with something. That's and then it's not like I can't be wrong or I can't misspeak. I will, I have, and I don't mind being corrected. But if you're gonna correct me with the right stuff. Correct me with the things that I actually say. Don't try to correct me with some bullshit. Because you notice he didn't come back in it. I asked him, you know who Lamu and Lama is? If you don't know nothing. Didn't come back to all that shit that I said about that. Didn't come back and say nothing. You know what? Where my damn cigar case at? I can't reach it. don't come with something. Come with something. See, and people ask me all the time why I don't do debate. I don't do debates. It's because it's always some. Check my link. I said closer to year 500. It was in the 400s. Okay, so this is what I would think about that in a logical standpoint. All right, so rock with me, Echo, on this one. Echo. If it was in the 400s, it would make sense. This is how it makes sense, that you might have had some type of writing or a copy of what the Romans had already canonized. So if the Axiom Empire got converted, let me make sure. Let's get this, because I want to make sure we are going, because when we talk about this to people, they look for any kind of mistakes. So we got King Azana, and we know that he adopted it in order to have better relationships with Rome. All right, here we go. So, King Azana of Axiom, he declared Christianity state religion in 330 AD. All right, 330. Oh, I see what you're saying about the Grimoire Gospels. And those are thought to be the world's oldest illuminated Christian manuscript. They're not sure, they're thought to be. So what we have in this situation, let's think about this through a timeline. All right. 318. Okay, so Christianity is not being persecuted under Constantine or Maxentius. They have their battle in around, I think, like 312. 318, Constantine makes Christianity legal in the Roman Empire. 325, by the time we get to 325, there are Christian bishops with authority all over the Roman Empire. One of those Christian bishops with authority is Athanasius, who was the Pope of Alexandria in Egypt. 325, they come and have the Nicene Council. Athanasius is the primary, it was tasked with two main things. Make sure that the Easter falls on the right date, and he was the one that pushed for the canon and for the books that would be canonized in the Bible. Frumentius was one of the church elders from Athanasius' district, from his church, and Frumentius was the one that went into Ethiopia in 330 and converted them, and was the primary person who converted them over. So Frumentius would have been bringing to what he would have been bringing to King Zana would have been what became the canonized Bible from Athanasius, who was putting the canon together. And it would make sense that King Azana would have that document, that canon, translated into their language so that it can be spread to the rest of his people, since he was making that into the church, into Christianity. That doesn't make the Ethiopian Bible the oldest Bible, because it was copied from somebody else's Bible. with me? So it's still nowhere that's the oldest. And then that whole complete thing, you know, that's just words to try to convince people. First of all, Samuel, I'm not the one blocking you. That's my moderator. If you say something that's out of line, and people can only go as far as the Bible can take them. I don't even know what you're talking about. he's the Joker, my arch enemy. Come on, man. I'm a Marvel guy. Don't make me DC. See, this is the back pedal. Everyone's a fool because nobody will live long enough to learn 1% of what there is to know. But yet you made the see this is what people don't realize what they say. And I'm very good at remembering what people have said and connecting them. You were the one who said that I don't know nothing about monks of Nirvana, and implying that I don't know nothing about nothing, that I don't know enough, that I don't know enough. I didn't say that you had to know everything. That's the part you're not realizing. So you're double talking yourself, sir. Did not know you were asking. I don't know. May Kajuta. I don't know what that word means. Exactly. Last time I checked as well, debates were about facts and less about asinine name calling like a child. And that is why you get blocked, bro. You want to be honest that why you get blocked is because you don't offer much of anything towards a debate. Oh, you thought I was asking you about Lama and Lamu, about the Sumerians? No. That was mainly because Samuel was like, if I don't, that this guy doesn't even know about monks Nirvana and something else, and I'm like, as if a person has to know something about everything. If you don't know something about something, that means you don't know nothing about anything. And I was giving that as an example of things that I'm pretty sure he does not know about. So it would invalidate his entire statement. Yeah, just want to be seen. Yeah. And if people don't agree with me, I don't care. We can have a comment. We can still have discussion. Marvel, what man? Get out of here. I'm Marvel, man. I mean, I like some DC, but I'm a Marvel dude. I'm trying to catch up. More Demiurge content. We talk about the Demiurge. Um, is the Hebrew Bible the older complete book? See that word complete. That's where things get kind of lost a bit, because what would you call complete? I finally caught up. Man, you on yesterday. You're not right. Just like Mexico's not Central America. Uh, they consider themselves in Central America. The world pretty much considers them that as Central America. So whatever. Unless they've changed it over the last since I was recently, it's Central America. Is the Hebrew Bible the older complete book? So the Hebrew Bible is the Old Testament, and it's just the Old Testament. But that Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible, would also, I think that also includes the War of the Maccabees, right? Um, but even in that, there's still some books that are not in there that they can. That's kind of like additional books if you go into Kabbalah, which like the books of Enoch are not part of the Hebrew Bible. Now, if we're talking about the Hebrew Bible that Christians accept, Grand Rising, Eyes Wide Open. If you're talking about the one that Christians accept, then that will be different because it's missing. It's not going to have like the Book of Jasher, the Book of Jubilees, the Maccabees, the books of Enoch. So completeness is, there's really no such thing as a complete Bible because different groups, whether it's Hebrew Bible or Christian Bible, because different groups are going to add in or out. And this is a cigar, by the way. I don't want to joke this. Matter of fact, let me put this band back on here. Let me put this band back on here. I just thought about that. Let me put my band back on here because I usually take the band off. This is a cigar. I just thought about how it looked when I'm holding it in my hand. But yeah, so there's no complete. Complete would be putting every book that is so-called inspired by God of these people in there. So that would be the if we're just looking at the Hebrew Bible, that would be Genesis, Enoch, all the books that are in there now, but Jasher, Jubilees, Maccabees, it would be all of those books. But you have groups that put it in or out. Hell, it wasn't until I think 1st or 2nd century that the Jewish people closed their canon, that the Jewish Bible was closed, that the canon was closed. I think it was like 1st or 2nd century that was closed. They were still debating, even up to the time of Jesus. Supposedly, they were still debating on what's God of God and what is not of God. AI Bible, any thoughts? There's an AI Bible. What's a like? I don't know of an AI Bible. You mean like computer generated artificial intelligence Bible? That would be interesting, but I don't know of that one. Who were not sure myself. Boy, that talking text got you good on that one, Norman. But yeah. And then you got to throw in some of the stuff from the Dead Sea Scrolls. People say using the Ethiopian Bible argument. People say using the Ethiopian Bible, but they practice nothing like the Ethiopian Christians. They sure don't. Because them Ethiopian Christians, they hold down the law. They still are beholding to the law. They hold that damn law down way much more so than people who claim the Ethiopian Bible. You think they meant Trojan? Who is they? Since the Bible has been tampered with so bad, can we just throw it out and stick with the spiritual? That would be good if people can agree on what the spiritual is. Yeah, the Torah is the Old Testament, is the Hebrew Bible. It's what the Hebrew people, the Jewish people utilize. But even at that, different sects of Judaism have books that other sects don't have. This is a cigar, man. It's called a Toscano. Let me put this up by the camera. I ain't gonna have you ain't gonna I can't get it. Let me take myself out of it. Let's see. Anyway, it's a Toscano, it's a cigar. But the Torah, yeah. Now the Torah will be the entire thing. The Pentateuch is the first like 5 books, and then the Torah is the rest of it. But yeah, I think the Bible should be thrown out. Is it over there? I don't know if it's on the bookshelf down here or the bookshelf upstairs. I'm not going upstairs. Oh, but that's one of the reasons why I like the Tao Te Ching. It's very simple. Very simple. Easy way of living your life. Not with all this bullshit. I gotta believe in some deities and some damn messiahs and these non-historical people. We all still learning. So, first of all, my moderator understands that if somebody is just being insulting but not offering any facts or any actual debatable points, Samuel, then and they just want to throw out name calling, block them, put them in timeout. So if you want to stop being, if you don't want to be blocked, then you have to respect one, the host, and then two, the context of what we're talking about, and then three, everybody else on here. So if you want to respond and not be blocked, that's all you gotta do. It's really that simple. What about the Talmud? Oh shit! Why am I having a brain fart on the Talmud? It just where are my eyeballs? Sometimes my brain works the way my brain works. Sometimes if I just see a spark of something, it reminds me of everything. Talmud. Um, can't really say much about Talmud. I don't remember reading much about it. Reading it too tough. It seems, it looks it looks like something that they like a way of life, like breaking down how they should live in Jewish society. Um, but it looks like it's based on Babylonian. And like it's kind of in like a more of the legal system of Jewish culture. So I didn't get a spark of information in my head on that one. All right, so the Bible is metaphorical. How much is literal? Did Jesus exist, or is he a metaphor for raising your consciousness? Jesus did not exist. And more, is he a metaphor? No, he's not a metaphor. He's a creation of a Messiah that's docile, so that the Jewish revolts, in an attempt to stop the Jewish revolts in Rome. Later on, things were ascribed to him to kind of give him more enlightenment. Uh, but as a being itself in its initial creation, it was trying to convert the Jewish people to Christianity so they'll stop raising hell in the Roman Empire. Now, later writers, as people jumped on the bandwagon and writing that Jesus said this and Jesus said that, and all these different gospels of everybody, um, they try to, in order to, if you're going to write a gospel and you're going to write this being that, then you have to add in whatever the ideas of enlightenment are at that time frame. And so these things were then added to this Jesus character as he became more and more legendized by the later writers of people who think that they know what they're talking about. Galatians 4 talks about more about the Old Testament being allegory, not so much about the New Testament being allegory. Because it's that one, when you look at it from the context of it all, it's more in relation to Abraham, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and all of them, utilizing them more as allegory instead of reality. The writers when the writer of Galatians was believing Jesus was an actual person. Because there were a lot of questions of people at the time frame that this Jesus enlightenment is very different from the Old Testament enlightenment or slavery worship. I'm working on the Pizzo family. That's what I forgot. Angelina, that's why when I said there was a subject matter that I knew I need to go home and work on to remember. And by the time I got home, I forgot what it was, and it was probably going to hit me. That's what it was. It was the Pizzo family. I was with you, my guy, but then it fell out my head on my way home. Okay, dude. Mexico is part of North America. You happy now? I went and looked at it real quick. Mexico is considered part of North America. All right. It's not part of Central America. You was right. Okay. No Abraham, no tribes, no bloodline. No, there's not. There's not. There is no Abraham, so there is no 12 tribes. There is no bloodline. These things are created in order to give a people some kind of history. But Abraham didn't exist. Abraham should be one of the easiest people to find, or at least some bones or something. Well, those bones wouldn't last it. But Abraham says where he was buried, but yet they have not found any burial sites. And in that same burial site, you should have Abraham, Sarah, Isaac, his wife, Rebecca, Jacob, and Leah should all be, and Joseph. They all should be buried in the same place. Because according to that book, all of them were buried in that same spot. And homosexuality was a sin because they had to make them not like the Greeks. The Greeks had male lovers and female lovers, female childbearers. Yeah, that is. But well, Old Testament makes homosexuality a sin, and that was put together while they were under the control of the Greeks. Well, initially under the control of the Persians. And then the Septuagint was produced under the control of the Greeks, and yet it's still in the Old Testament that was outlawed. So the Roman additions to it in the New Testament just balanced with the Greeks. The Greeks were allowing it to be spoken against them. Because one thing I will give Ptolemy the fourth, I think it was the fourth or the fifth, when he was collecting the information, it seems like he was more just whatever it is whatever it is. And it was this was a religion of these people over there. So you gotta understand, the Greeks didn't give a damn. If that's your religion, I don't care. It's not my God. That's your God. I worship Serapis. You worshiping some dude named Yahweh. Your God may exist. My God exists too. And most people back then were like that. Your God exists, my God exists. You worship your God, I worship my God. You do what you do. If that's okay with your God, then that's okay. But it's not with mine. That's you. It doesn't matter to me. Their mindset was it didn't matter. So the Greeks wouldn't have cared that they were translating these Old Testament sayings about, men sleeping with men as an abomination. They would not have cared about that. The Romans, they would have cared because the Romans couldn't stand the Greeks, even though they respected Greek antiquity, they couldn't stand them. One good thing came out of the Roman rewriting this book. What's the one good thing? Please note I'm Southern, so I don't share my truth with elders out of respect. Spirituality is not meant to bash. I don't understand why homosexuality is condemned in the book when it was part of the Greek culture. Oh, yeah. So because the Greeks didn't give a damn. I don't know if you was writing that while I was explaining that because I know there was a short delay, but because the Greeks didn't care. It's kind of like if you think about it today, if I were to write a religious book and say that this is from the god of the spaghetti monster on Saturn, and if a person is Christian, then the Christian person doesn't care if I condemn something that the Christian does because they could care less. But for the Greeks, like even in the now I do think that the Romans took a pop shot at the Greeks when they had, I think it's in Romans where Paul says something to the effect of talks about fornication, because fornication in its beginning meant men having sex with young boys. It had nothing to do with having sex out of wedlock. There was no having sex out of wedlock was adultery. That's it. If the person was single, then you just married that person. But I think they took a pop shot at the Greeks when they talked about fornication because that was having sex with young boys, and that was very much a Greek thing at the time. All right, Norman, have a great day at work. I'm having a great day at work right now. This is work. Whew. Congress means Greek bathhouse of men sexual acts. Never heard that one before. I wrote it wrong. Greeks slept with men and rewrote the verse to reflect that Greeks were sinners to turn everyone away from them, to discourage anyone to help the Romans. I don't know. I never thought about that. I would have to look at the timelines and things of that nature. Like what year was the Septuagint written? What was the political environment between the Greeks and the Romans during that time frame? Were there Romans around during that time frame? Because when was the Septuagint put together? Modern scholars hold that the Septuagint was written from the 3rd century to the 1st century BCE. Okay, so that would be that the Septuagint was being written possibly during the time frame that the Roman Empire was growing. Because Rome didn't truly become a massive empire. They became like massive, it started really growing in that 3rd, 2nd, 1st century BCE. Well, maybe not 3rd, that might have been too early. Julius Caesar is not until 2nd century BCE, but Rome was already massive, starting to grow before Julius. So yeah, it's an interesting thought. I would have to contemplate that one. But wait a minute, Rome had already defeated the Greeks by the time they got involved with writing this Septuagint. Well, I mean, by the time they got involved with writing the Bible, writing the Christian Bible, because that wouldn't be until around 60, 70 AD that Rome gets involved in writing and creating this New Testament. And they had already conquered the Greeks by then. Do I use Strong's? Hell no. If you want to get the etymology of some words wrong, use Strong's. You want to get some breakdown of the Bible all jacked up? Strong's. I do not recommend Strong's. So, of course, back in the day, when I was, in my early years, my teenage years and early 20s, I was using Strong's. And I remember it had to be about 92. And I was sent a letter, a pen pal letter. We was having this conversation. And my guy in Israel was like, what are you using for interpretations? And I told him about Strong's, and I was like, yeah, this is what everybody used, that I know of. Everybody uses Strong's. And he wrote me back, and he was like, when you get to Israel, we're gonna have to have a serious conversation about what you use for research on language and breaking this thing down, because he was like, what you using is jacked up. And that's when I started realizing more and more that I didn't just take his word for it, but I just started looking at other data. And of course, I didn't have the internet. So I'm like reading PhD papers and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, Strong's is jacked up. So I kind of let go of Strong's like late 92. Because by the time I did get to Israel, I was like, okay, look, I don't use this Strong's no more. All right, leave me alone. They fall into the year 200 BC or CE? So it says, although the Romans conquered the Greek peninsula in 146 BCE, they did not take control of Egypt until 31 BC. Some historians consider this to be the end of the Hellenistic period. So I thought so. I was going to say, wait a minute, that would be like Cleopatra would have been the last one, and that was after Julius Caesar. I don't know. According to this, they had already how could have been 180 AD. Couldn't have been that long. Couldn't have been 180 AD. Because Cleopatra was the last Hellenistic ruler, and she was defeated with Mark Antony by Augustus Caesar, and that would have been after Julius Caesar. So that around the 31. Like it was saying, by 31 BC. Yeah. So they weren't like finished off until around 31. You still got you have almost a whole 100 years. You got almost a whole 100 years before the New Testament even gets started to be written. What are your thoughts on the Ius being linked to the Jesus Greek Zeus? I don't think it's linked at all. It's mistranslations. It's a mistranslation and used improperly. Like people like to jump. There's no J, and then they go to Ius and Isus, meaning the saving Zeus. No. What you're looking at is Yeshua or Yeshua being a name, but the Greeks doesn't have the wa or the sh sound in it. So when they translated it over, it was translated into the Ius and then Isus, because that was the closest they can get to their translation of Yahshua or Yeshua. But it wasn't them trying to translate Zeus. The 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 EUS or the SUS is just in relation. It's kind of like how they had L on the back of all the angels' name, meaning of God. So it was like how they would translate Yeshua. So it's a accurate Latin, Greek, and Latin translation, because the Latin translation is just from the Greek translation, but it's an accurate Greek translation of Ius, but it's no relation to Zeus. That was mind-blowing, disheartening, yet supremely enlightening. Were you talking about that strong? Yeah. I had to let that one go decades ago. But yeah, I used to be in that camp. You go find some of my old videos about 6, 8 years ago. Oh, I was all up on that. I usually thought it's the saving Zeus. About 8, 9 years ago, about 6 years ago, probably at the latest. I mean, at the earliest. But yeah, I was all up in that. And then I wound up, I was researching it. And I was like, I was doing some research, and I wound up looking at better details. I was looking at the I'm trying to think of his name, but he was this Harvard professor, little guy, bald head, little glasses, small little guy, and I had first started listening to him about a video, his lectures on Josephus, and then he went into a lecture on the transliteration of the name from Yeshua to Jesus, and I was like, "Wow, I'll be damned." And then, of course, I went and checked all his references and everything, that he referenced, and checked his personal reference of who he was, and I was like, "Oh, okay, it worked for me." I want to offer from somebody from Twitch. I was wondering what Twitch would look like, or if they could comment on here. But let me see what you're saying. I want to offer promotion to your channel, viewers, followers, your channel, chat box. The price is lower than the competitors. Any type of advertisements needs to be sent to me on an off channel, like through an email or something like that. But please don't do that on the live. I greatly appreciate it. Jordan Maxwell. Why does that name sound familiar to me? I know that name. No, not Jordan Maxwell. But I have seen this guy on some stuff before, though. What have I seen Jordan Maxwell on? Oh, I seen him on Gaia. That's where I seen him on. I knew he looked familiar. Don't remember anything right offhand of what he talked about, but I do remember seeing it. What is my mail? Yeah, I do interviews on other channels. My preference is that they can be simulcasted onto mine, or at least I get a copy of it that I can place on my channels. Um, Yeah, but I'll do an interview. We just have to discuss what it is, that sort of thing. Oh shit! Put my email on all of them. So I'm glad that somebody from that Twitch one said, well, even that came up, because at least it lets me know. Okay, I see that. This is my first one on Twitch, so I'm kind of figuring that one out. But yeah, look, interview. We can give me an idea of what we're gonna be talking about. Sent in the email. Let me know what kind of an interview it will be. What we talk, in general, what we're talking about. Now, and I'm sure that can be arranged. But I am going to be starting another channel, especially the other day when I told y'all that my favorite subjects in order goes intimacy, tantra, and then this spirituality. I am going to start a tantric channel and start doing lives about intimacy and relationship and tantra. So I hope you guys will join me on that one when I actually put it together. There's already there's already a YouTube page called The Art of Tantric Love, but I got to create the Facebook and the Twitch page for it. So hopefully you guys are doing that too. I need to stimulate my mind in other areas of interest as well. So what have you guys, what is there something that sticks out to you more today that you picked up today, more so than anything else? Like, what's the main thing that you're going to go away from this video about? Almost 3 hours ago, we was talking about these different, like, Dionysus and the Iliad and the Odyssey, how you see similarities between the Bacchae, the Iliad, the Odyssey. You can find themes of those in the Jesus story. We talked about Atticus, Osiris, and the themes from them that you see in the Jesus story, and all these other ones, Krishna and Mithra. And then we went into a whole bunch of other conversations where, we talked about Constantine, the Ethiopian Bible, different timelines of things happening. How I noticed Diane didn't say anything after I showed her that after she only said about Acts and going in the cloud, but she didn't say anything concerning the differences in how Mark, Matthew, and Luke don't agree as to where Jesus went after, where the apostles supposedly went, and Jesus showed up to the apostles after the so-called resurrection. But we had a chance to look at it and see once again how this book is not worked well together, that they're not succinct, because Matthew, Mark, they went to Galilee. Luke, John stayed in Jerusalem. And then in Luke, they also went towards Bethany. So, went through a lot of information today. So I'm curious, what stuck out the most for you guys? Oh, I appreciate you. And am I calling you Echo, or you want to call him, what's that? Bully? I like to say people's names right, but Echo, I don't know if that's right. But I do appreciate it. Please share these videos. Share the videos. That's how we grow. That's how y'all keep me doing this, is by sharing. I ain't gonna lie. If you subscribe, if you do a subscribe, that's great. If you do a subscription to whatever page you're on, whether it's Twitch, YouTube, or Facebook, I greatly appreciate the subscriptions. I greatly appreciate when people do super chats on YouTube or stars on Facebook. And I think Twitch does some kind of gift thing, because I'm learning that one. I do appreciate those things. Those things keep me here. Echo, okay. uh, because I don't want to have to go start another company and then have to be there for 12 hours a day. I refuse to go back to that. That's why we shut down the cigar lounge. But we're gonna make it right here. So continue to share. I appreciate those things. And if you feel the need to, I know I got to create something to entice people to do a subscription. I just hate. I'd rather people just do it out of the goodness of their heart instead of me having to say that, hey, if you do a subscription, then you're going to get these special privileges. But I know people want special privileges. Like that's the sales technique. I don't want to be a salesperson in that regard, where I have to say, okay, those people who. Now I will say this: people who do subscriptions. The only thing I have said is that subject matters to which they bring up have a higher probability of me doing a video or live concerning that subject matter. But I really do lives based on things that interest me or things that I think would interest y'all. So I hate, it's not the way you're supposed to do it according to all the little people, but I'm supposed to offer you special shit. But I'm just gonna go with goodness of people's hearts. How about that? Because I want to share everything with everybody. You know what I'm saying? I do appreciate the people who have sought out my coaching. It's been it's good. It's great to do that. I love doing that, working with people one-on-one. Because then I get to dive deep into their individual pathway, what they're dealing with. So, look, another Twitch person. Hey, Twitch person A Ferraro. This is my first time on Twitch. That's why I'm like excited about people who come on here for Twitch. So the rest of y'all don't get jealous on Facebook and YouTube. But yeah, so with that, we're gonna go ahead and call it a day today. It's been great, even though y'all didn't answer my question to tell me what portions of the video, the portions of the talk was most enlightening, had the most impact for you. Y'all don't want to answer my question. See how y'all treat me. Because honestly, it lets me know for future videos, certain things that we might be able to go deeper into by knowing what portions of this conversation inspired you the most or hit you the most. Like if it was the Bacchae, or the Odyssey and the Iliad, and how those compare to Jesus, or if it was the differences in the resurrection story. So, but if you don't want to tell me, fine. I'm just gonna keep on figuring it out. And if you're finding this video late, if you find this chat late, and we're about to shut down, just go back and rewatch it. I guarantee you're going to enjoy it. I am not a basic kind of teacher where it's all stoic and boring, and I am sometimes a smart ass. So don't get in your feelings. But with that, I want you guys to have a great day, because I'm about to have one. It's cloudy out there, like it might rain. Got a little breeze going. So y'all have a great day, and remember always, you got to free yourself to be yourself, because your greatness is not negotiable. Good journey, good vibrations, and I will see you guys tomorrow around 10 o'clock. Oh, wait a minute. Now y'all want to say some stuff. Yeah, I'm sorry, Ferraro. I'm probably saying that so wrong. I like to chat more about the whole topic. More people need to make these connections. I love your videos, please. Let's also like the video. It helps the algorithm. Yep, like the videos that help the algorithm too. Yeah. As soon as I end this, Ferraro, You can rewatch it on Twitch as soon as it processes. You'll enjoy it. But we normally I start normally around 10 o'clock, 10:15. Okay. So I don't know how alerts work on Twitch. Appreciate that, Don. Thank you for the donation. Let me know anytime y'all in Atlanta too. Anytime y'all in Atlanta, let me know ahead of time. But for real, gotta go. Appreciate you guys.